a storm is brewing on the horizon. And I'm not referring to the snow and ice storm coming to my area tomorrow. I'm referring to the a storm that is brewing within European capitals, among NATO leaders, and in uh, the media of especially UK. So there has been a very widespread and strong reaction to the words of President Donald Trump. We will get the words here from a Alistair Carnes, who served 5 times in Afghanistan along with Allied soldiers. So anyway, first we will get to President Trump's comments, and then we will hear some of the reactions. So here we go.
We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
So a little off the front lines. So I guess that means the water boys for the true stars who, you know, performed marvelously. Were they the second team, the bench warmers, the the footnotes at the bottom of the page? So what was the contribution of NATO soldiers in Afghanistan? President Trump doesn't shows he doesn't appreciate their contributions. That basically they were just there, doing this and that, but they weren't on the front lines fighting. And but the number of losses, 457 British soldiers perished in that conflict, and many more were wounded, physically, or had some form of PTSD or amputations. So the fact is that many NATO soldiers suffered deeply from this conflict, and to say that they stood a little back off the front lines has caused a very strong reaction. So first, we will get a reaction here from a Simon Marks, who's on the James O'Brien show on the LBC network, on the LBC YouTube channel. So I will put the links to all of these resources below in the description box. So anyway, we'll hear what Simon Marks has to say.
News in the United States, James, to the extent that they are obviously making news on your side of the Atlantic, and also in Canada as well. Because remember, this is the week in which Mark Carney officially consigned the transatlantic alliance to the ash heap of history based on Donald Trump's actions. I would make the point that this is not an aberration by President Donald Trump. To put these remarks into context, to put the trashing of the reputation of British service personnel who were slain in Afghanistan alongside 159 Canadians, 44 Danes, the highest per capita fatality rate in Afghanistan was suffered by Denmark. To put all of this into its broader context, we are at the end of a week in which Donald Trump and his top lieutenants removed the last vestiges of their mask. They are not hiding their loathing of Europe, everything that it stands for.
So there we go. That is his reaction, the trashing of the memory of those deceased UK servicemen who were slain on the front lines in Afghanistan. And we have this MP who served 5 times in Afghanistan, and he has a thing or two to say.
NATO troops stayed a little off the front lines in Afghanistan, and that the US has never necessarily needed us. Well, it's a real shame to hear that. The only time NATO has ever enacted Article 5 was after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, when the United States and the world rallied to the support of the US. Our agencies, our forces, our politicians, we all stood together, shoulder to shoulder, and responded. On Afghanistan, frankly, this is utterly ridiculous. Many courageous and honourable service personnel from many nations fought on the front line. Many fought way beyond it. I'd served 5 tours in Afghanistan, Many alongside my American colleagues, we shed blood, sweat, and tears together.
So there we have another comment. I think that was he's the defense minister. And here we have Sir Keir Starmer, who is also, kind of back against the wall. He wants to stand strongly with President Trump, but this time he can't do that. So he makes a very strong statement as well. Here we go.
A sacrifice that they made for their country. There are many also who were injured, some with life-changing injuries. And so I consider President Trump's remarks to be insulting and frankly appalling.
So Sir Keir Starmer goes on to say that he's not going to ask President Trump to apologize, but he said if he was in his position, he would apologize. So will President Trump apologize for this statement? But going back to, President Trump, he has all this planned out. Why was he going to try to take down the memory of these NATO soldiers, say that they were standing back from the front lines? Why is he amplifying the U.S. military? Why is he minimizing the NATO allies? So this could go back certainly to the idea that he wants them to take over the conflict in Ukraine. And so, when we hear his comment from President Trump and we hear what President Zelensky said about the, all his, the Europeans who live in Europe but not necessarily for Europe, we see kind of, I don't know if it's a pattern, but I think President Trump is pushing the European countries to be more assertive in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He wants to pull back for these conflicts that would be brewing, I guess, in the South China Sea, possibly in South America. Maybe he's planning to do something with Brazil. Maybe he's planning to do something with Nicaragua. Where else in the world would he be attacking? He may attack in many places. Of course, now we have the U.S. ships steaming towards the Strait of Hormuz. That possibly in an effort to have the round two in the Iran-Israel conflict. So President Trump wants to focus on conflicts that are beneficial to the United States, and he no longer sees the Ukraine conflict as beneficial. So he wants the European allies to be more assertive, to get more resources, more troops, more weapons to Ukraine. I don't know, maybe escalate on their own. So it's hard to say exactly what is in President Trump's mind, but the effect of trying to get someone to do something by insulting them doesn't always work. And this could be one of those cases, because President Trump has been kind of destroying the whole NATO foundation, one brick at a time, between his effort to take over Greenland and now his insult of the memory of those NATO soldiers who died in Afghanistan, saying that these troops really weren't on the front lines. They stood a little back. So I guess they were the bench warmers, the water boys, what have you. But I think that President Trump is growing impatient with the NATO allies. He wants them to do something. They're not doing it. So he's now, resorted to this kind of insults. So this sounds very similar to what Zelensky was attempting to do. And most people will say, for in the case of Zelensky, if you insult the Europeans, you're showing that you're ungrateful. They've given you basically everything. They've given you money, weapons, support. They've provided, a political backstop to this Ukrainian government. So insulting the Europeans may not get the desired result. And I think in this case as well, I think President Trump is to the point where he says, if these NATO countries don't pick up the pace, then so be it. The NATO can fall, and we will still continue to have our presence and still go in and carry out actions in different countries, what we feel is in our interest, but we will no longer, have the need to maintain this NATO superstructure, which is draining us of money and whatever President Trump thinks that NATO is doing to the United States. So anyway, we also had a strong reaction from Prince Harry. I guess is he Prince anymore? So anyway, this will definitely be another nail in the coffin of NATO, and this could be a very definite point in history when you can say NATO died on this date, or this was a very important reference point in the end of NATO, because you begin insulting the memories of those deceased soldiers. That is really an extreme measure. So, but like I say, President Trump, he has something very specific he wants to achieve. He wants the NATO countries to ramp it up. He considers them to be simply like guests in a giant yacht, and they're wining and dining, and they're eating all this free food, and they're enjoying themselves with the music and with the champagne and with all the important people. But this boat is the United States, and the everything about this party is the United States, and they're just kind of there, fill-ins or filler people. Definitely not the idea of Europeans being A-listers. They're down there in the list, down there in the ranking. So President Trump now in his second term, he will be pushing much harder for NATO countries to get up to that 5%, to step up to the plate in some of these conflicts, because President Trump wants to pivot, and he can't pivot while he's bogged down in Ukraine. And you can see a kind of a similar frustration in Zelensky's speech, telling the Europeans that they haven't done enough, that they may be European because of geography, but they're not European in their heart. And so many considered what President Zelensky said to the Europeans was also insulting. So anyway, I will leave that at there. What do you think this will achieve? Will this be the end of NATO, or will this be the moment that the NATO countries say, you know what, we're going to pick up the pace and we're going to do more, and we're going to take charge in the Russia-Ukraine conflict? So anyway, please leave your comments below, whatever they may be. And if you like this video, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe. And due to the coming storm, an actual storm, which will be here tomorrow and departs on Monday, I may not be able to upload videos during that time, but I look forward to seeing you again on the other side of this ice and snowstorm, and wish everyone well. And if you're also being hit by the same storm, I hope you don't lose power. But anyway, these energy grids tend to fail, especially if there's ice and it brings down limbs that fall on power lines. So anyway, I'll let you go, and thanks again for joining me. If you have any comments, please do so below, and I'll leave these resources The links to them in the description box below. So thanks again, and best of luck to all of you. Have a great day. Bye bye.